Dialogue, I think it's the one thing that you can't teach. You know, screenwriting in a lot of ways is more akin to math than it is to sculpture, right? It's one of those things where, or I should say poetry. It's one of those things where there is a certain formula that if one does not follow, you don't end up with a satisfying movie. I mean, there are rare exceptions to it, but essentially the three-act structure has existed since the dawn of storytelling, and there's a reason for it. We process stories in a certain way with a beginning, middle, and an end. TV series is different, but when you look at the totality of a TV series, you know, it's more like a novel, but again, there's a beginning, middle, and end. But screenplays are tight. Screenplays are usually, you know, an hour and a half to 3 hours at the out, unless you're Martin Scorsese, and then you walk that hybrid line. But there's something I love about that, because, you know, you think about when we started telling stories around a campfire in a cave, you know, when the fire went out, the story better be done and everyone better feel satisfied. So those things, anyone can learn those things. You know, you learn that structure. If you've got a head for math, you can figure out, okay, in act one, this needs to happen. Act two, this needs to happen. Act three, this needs to be resolved. Dialogue is different in that I think just the way some people are born with an ability to have perfect pitch and carry a tune, and some people are tone deaf, you can either hear the way people talk and see how that needs to be written down into words, or you can't. I mean, it's interesting because Norman was very tone deaf. I mean, he was one of the worst singers, I think, in the history of all song, and proudly so. He sang the loudest. But it was interesting to me because he couldn't really hear the musicality necessarily of the way other people spoke. Obviously, this is, you know, I'm being incredibly general. I don't want to write off his dialogue. His dialogue was, you know, he had moments of incredible dialogue, but it was different. There's someone from Brooklyn speaks differently than someone from Arkansas, and the way you write that down is different. And I don't know how I could try to explain that to somebody in terms of what you do. So in a way, it's one of those things where if you're good at it, you can't take too much pride in it, because it's like you're born with it or you're not. So don't be proud of it. Use it as a tool to help make the point and get it out with it. But for me, depending on whether it's commissioned work or I'm writing something for myself, I usually start with research and try to get to know a subject inside and out and all the various aspects. And there's usually kind of 2 to 3 major motifs and elements in it. So I don't want to get into the motifs that are in Diary because I don't want to do any giveaways, but you know, there are these, you know, let's take a film like Blind, right, where part of it was that you've got somebody who once had sight and then lost their vision. And how does a person navigate the world? So I spent a lot of time at the Lighthouse for the Blind. I spent a lot of time, you know, researching the mechanics of the eyeball. What does someone actually see there? How do you, if you live alone, how do you function and get through? Well, at the same time, it's a love story. So there are those components that are going in. I think it's, you know, for me, it's always really important to be really well-versed in what you're writing about. There are people that can just, you know, hear an idea and straight from the shop, write it, and it's perfect and it's great. I'm much more meticulous and thought out in terms of my process, and it takes a lot of time for me.